You're not going to believe what happens next. That's the first thought that crossed my mind when I came across this unbelievable moment. Imagine this. You're standing in a public space, calmly filming, fully aware of your rights, and out of nowhere, someone steps in to challenge you. They question your presence, demand identification, and suddenly, the situation feels like a test of patience, knowledge, and confidence. What would you do? In this story, we follow someone who doesn't just respond. They take control like a pro. No panic, no hesitation, just pure composure and a firm grasp of the First Amendment. This isn't just another encounter. It's a masterclass in handling tense moments with clarity and respect. But here's the catch. It doesn't take long for things to escalate. The air is thick with tension, and the question lingers. Will standing firm be enough to diffuse the situation, or will this lead to something bigger? Stick around to see how this unfolds and prepare to be inspired. Whether you're new to First Amendment audits or a seasoned pro, there's a lot to learn from this encounter. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. It all started in what seemed like a typical day. Our protagonist was out filming in a public area, minding their own business, fully aware of their right to record in a public space. The goal was simple: document the everyday happenings, exercise their First Amendment rights, and perhaps educate a few people along the way. But as we all know, not everyone sees the camera the same way. It wasn't long before a figure emerged from the background, a security guard or perhaps a passerby with a little too much curiosity. Their tone wasn't immediately hostile, but there was a clear demand. "What are you doing here? I need to see some ID." You could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the quiet tension building with every passing second. This wasn't their first rodeo, though. Calmly and confidently, they stood their ground, politely explaining their rights without being confrontational. But the other person wasn't backing down either. Each question seemed to carry more weight, the exchange becoming a subtle battle of authority versus knowledge. Who would give in first? It was clear that this was about more than just filming. It was about principles. The situation was far from over. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear this wasn't going to be a simple exchange. The person questioning our protagonist started digging deeper, insisting that filming wasn't allowed and claiming some vague policy as the reason. But policy isn't law, and that's exactly where the tension lay. Our protagonists stayed calm, their voice steady as they explained their rights again, this time with a little more emphasis. They knew the law was on their side, but the other person wasn't ready to back down. Around them, people started to notice. Some paused to watch from a distance, curious about what was happening. Others kept moving, avoiding the scene entirely. It added another layer to the moment. This wasn't just about two people anymore. It was now public, a stage where confidence and knowledge were being tested. But then another voice entered the mix, a supervisor, maybe, or just someone who overheard and felt compelled to join in. They sided with the first person, doubling down on the demand for identification. The pressure was mounting, but our protagonist wasn't fazed. They didn't raise their voice or lose their composure, which only seemed to frustrate their challengers more. The standoff wasn't just about rights anymore. It was about control. The outcome, still hanging in the balance. The air grew heavier with every passing second. The tension wasn't just between our protagonist and their challengers anymore. It had spread to the onlookers. A few people started murmuring to each other, unsure of whether to step in or stay out of it. The supervisor, now clearly irritated, leaned in with a more assertive tone. "If you don't show some ID, we're going to have a problem." It was a power play, plain and simple, but one that didn't shake the steady demeanor of the person behind the camera. The protagonist calmly reiterated, "With all due respect, I'm exercising my right to film in public. I don't need to show ID unless I'm legally required to. The response, while polite, seemed to spark even more frustration. The challengers exchanged glances, their body language showing a mix of confusion and determination to stay in control. Then came the moment that changed the energy entirely. One of them reached for a phone, possibly to call law enforcement. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was escalating into something much bigger. Would this turn into a full confrontation? The crowd held its breath as the tension hit its peak, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Just as the phone call seemed inevitable, something unexpected happened. A voice from the crowd, calm but firm, broke through the tense silence. Actually, he's right. He's allowed to film here. Heads turned toward the source, a man, likely just a passerby, now stepping forward. He seemed to know exactly what he was talking about, his words carrying a quiet authority. The challengers froze for a moment, clearly caught off guard. The supervisor hesitated, their confidence wavering slightly. "And who are you?" They shot back, trying to reassert control. The man didn't flinch. "Just someone who knows the law," he replied casually, gesturing toward the protagonist. "You can't demand ID unless there's reasonable suspicion of a crime, and filming in public isn't one." The crowd, once passive observers, started to shift. Some nodded, clearly agreeing with the newcomer, while others leaned in, intrigued by this sudden twist. But instead of calming the situation, the unexpected support only seemed to escalate things further. The challengers, now feeling the pressure of both the crowd and the confrontation, doubled down. "This isn't about the law, it's about our policy." The tension spiked again, higher than before, as the situation spiraled toward an explosive turning point. The supervisor, clearly frustrated now, squared their shoulders and took a deep breath. "Fine," they said, their voice sharp. "If you're so sure of your rights, let's see what the authorities have to say about it." They stepped aside, phone in hand, dialing as the tension thickened. The crowd watched in silence, the weight of the moment almost palpable. But then, as everyone braced for the situation to escalate further, the unexpected happened. Just as the call connected, another figure appeared. This time, it was a uniformed officer. The timing seemed almost surreal, as if the universe itself had decided to intervene. The officer approached slowly, taking in the scene, their expression calm but alert. Before anyone could speak, the officer addressed the supervisor directly. "What seems to be the issue here?" they asked, their tone neutral. The supervisor quickly explained their side, emphasizing the need for ID and mentioning their policy. But as they spoke, the officer's expression remained unchanged. When the supervisor finished, the officer turned to the protagonist. "You're just filming in a public space?" they asked. A simple nod was the response. Without hesitation, the officer turned back to the supervisor. "They're within their rights. There's no law being broken here." The shift was immediate. The supervisor's confidence evaporated as the officer's words hung in the air. The crowd, now visibly on the protagonist's side, murmured in approval. But just as the tension began to ease, the officer added one final twist. "Actually, I suggest everyone here review the laws about public recording. It's important to know what you can and can't do on both sides." The moment was a stark reminder that understanding your rights goes both ways. As the crowd dispersed and the challengers retreated, the protagonist stood tall, their composure unshaken. It wasn't just a victory, it was a lesson for everyone who witnessed it. As the crowd began to thin out, the tension in the air gave way to a quieter sense of resolution. The protagonist thanked the officer with a respectful nod and calmly packed up their equipment, the same steady demeanor they'd carried throughout the encounter. Meanwhile, the challengers, now visibly deflated, avoided further eye contact and moved away, perhaps realizing they had underestimated the situation. A few bystanders lingered, some offering words of support and curiosity. "How did you stay so calm?" one asked. The protagonist smiled and replied, "It's all about knowing your rights and staying respectful. There's no need to argue when the law is on your side." It was more than just a win for one person. The moment became an eye-opener for everyone who had witnessed it, a reminder of the importance of staying informed and standing firm without escalating conflict. As the protagonist walked away, the sense of accomplishment wasn't just personal. It felt like a small but meaningful victory for accountability and awareness. The message was clear. Staying composed and informed can turn even the toughest situations into opportunities for growth and understanding.